I want to welcome Mayor Ashley Curry and also Jeff Downs, City Manager, our Assistant City Manager, Cinnamon McCullough. Also, we want to welcome our prior President of the Chamber, Karen Ogle. And we also want to welcome our Fire Chief, Marvin Green, our Police Chief, Shane Ware. We're so glad to have y'all. And we've also got some prior presidents of the Historical Society. And if you can't stand, would you hold your hand up, please? Because we need to give these people a hand. Ruby Denson, Ann Boston, and Mary Howell. Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for coming today. We have a wonderful program planned for you. I want to tell you that the Vestavia Hills Historical Society Board is looking for new officers. So if you are interested in serving as an officer of the Historical Society, contact Ann Boston or Karen Schallenberg. Okay, now Ruby Denson has informed me that she has something to say. And Ruby is one of the founders of the Historical Society Beautification Board and has worked tirelessly for many years for the City of Vestavia. Ruby.
Good afternoon, boys and girls. See, I can say that now. Boys and girls. Doesn't that sound good? That should make you feel better. The only thing I want to do is I want us to say a big, big thank you to Sheila for 14 long years with this Historical Society. We would not have a Historical Society if it wasn't for you, Sheila. She's been here 14 years, and she has been on the board or an officer for 30 years. So I think we need to really, really say a big, big thank you to her. Thank
you. Well, that was sort of a surprise. I thought she was going to preach to all of you about not joining the Historical Society. But thank you so much. It's been my honor to serve this Historical Society all these years, and I will continue to be an active member. Okay, now, I turn the page to say, our speaker today is an icon in Vestavia Hills. The past 45 years, he has worked with numerous administrations in the City of Vestavia Hills and has played a part in the city's growth from the inception of the school system to the annexation of Cahaba Heights and Liberty Park. We welcome Patrick H. Boone.
You're not nervous, are you?
Nervous? Heavens no. But it's dangerous to turn me loose talking with an unlimited amount of time, Charlie. At the outset, I want to thank all the members of the Vestavia Hills Historical Society for inviting me to the meeting to tell our story about our Vestavia Hills Board of Education and school system. And I was thrilled when Sheila called me and asked me to make this presentation. And I said, Sheila, how long have I got to talk? She said, oh, about 20 minutes. And I said, well, I'm not the man. I can't do it in 20 minutes. I can't even get warmed up in 20 minutes. And so, anyway, she said, you have an unlimited amount of time. And I want to tell you folks, this is a sunshine story. It is a wonderful, and it is a beautiful, and it is exciting story because it's our story about what we did together. And my lovely wife Nancy is here with us. She and I have been married for 58 years. We moved to Vestavia Hills in 1968. We worked hard to establish the school system. Our children were 2 years old and an infant when we organized our school system. Both children, Patrick Jr. and Julie, who's also here, thank you for coming, Julie, are here, and our 4 grandchildren finished the Vestavia Hills school system. Our system will be 55 years old Wednesday week, April 30th. We started with an idea of having a quality educational system with a low pupil-teacher ratio. Problem was, we had no money and no land. We had an idea, and we were willing to do it. Folks, I'm so happy to tell you that 55 years later, as of last January 2025, our Vestavia Hills school system had 23 National Merit Scholarship finalists, the most in the entire state of Alabama. So we started with 0, and look what happened 55 years later. And so this story is going to take a while, and I hope you'll find it as interesting as I found it to going through it. I want to begin our story in the early 1940s. My wife, Nancy, and I were both born in the early 1940s, and our parents lived in the city of Homewood, which was incidentally incorporated in 1926. The Purdues lived in the Mayfair community, and I lived in Edgewood. Like all of you, we know that Charlie R. Byrd is the founding father of the city of Vestavia Hills. And guess who my neighbor was in the early 1950s? Charles R. Byrd lived at 911 Westover Drive, about 3 blocks right over the hill from me. There wasn't any town of Vestavia Hills. We referred to this area simply as Shades Mountain. It was very rural, sparsely populated, and there was very, very little development. Well, Pat, tell us, why was this a wilderness? Why weren't people here? Well, this young lady that's lived here since 1944 can tell you it was impossible to get to. The access to Vestavia Hills from the valley was a spiral, corkscrew type of a highway that was hard to drive and negotiate. And the elevation of the bottom of the hill was 640 feet above sea level, and the top of the mountain is 1,120. So you can see that the angle to get to us through woods was impossible. What was on this mountain in the early 1940s? Well, we've all heard the stories about George B. Ward built the temple in his home in about 1925. There were some family homes here. There was an old 2-room wooden schoolhouse on Columbiana Road that would house about 40 students and 2 teachers. There was a country store. Joe's Ranch House and the drive-in theater showed up in about 1948. And the people that lived on Shades Mountain were after Jefferson County to build a new school. We got a rat hole for a school. We need a new school. And so finally, in 1948, the Jefferson County Board of Education went to Charlie Byrd, to see about buying some land. I've looked at the courthouse records, and Charlie Bird was associated with a company called Suburban Land Company that was incorporated in 1926. So the bottom line is the County Board of Education bought some acreage from Suburban Land Company through Charlie Bird, and they built a brand new schoolhouse where East Elementary presently sits. They let a contract, I have a photograph of the new school, but the new East School cost $63,000 to build. And it opened on September 12, 1949. September 12, 1949. That same day, I see my buddy Paul Boone, who I went to grade school and high school. That same day, the Jefferson County Board of Education opened Shades Valley High School. Shades Valley High School was big potatoes. It was a huge campus sitting on 40 acres, and it was a magnificent facility. And we're going to talk some more about Shades Valley High School. But at any rate, the school opened for Vestavia Elementary on September 12, 1949. At the same time, the Purdue family who lived in Mayfair bought some property in Vestavia Hills to build their home, and guess who they bought their property from? You got it, Charlie Bird. Howard and Dorothy Purdue bought the land that Nancy and I now live in 1949 and built a home and moved in it about a year later. Charlie Bird sitting back and said, well, we got a brand new school. Maybe we need a country club up here. So Charlie Bird and others got together and they went to Suburban Land Company and they bought some more land. And this venture was Vestavia Land Development Company, Vestavia Land Company, and it was a real estate investment company. And if you bought an investment in this real estate land company, your family got to be a member of Vestavia Country Club. So Vestavia Country Club started to build a golf course that they opened on June 12, 1950. And my father, and I don't know how he did it with a wife and 4 children, but he bought a $600 investment in Vestavia Land Company, and he got eligible to participate and play golf at Vestavia Club, and Nancy's father also did. And as a result of living in Homewood and my dad belonging to this little tiny club, I got exposed to Vestavia by coming up the mountain and traveling through Vestavia and meeting the young boys and girls up here. I played Little League Baseball against Charlie Stewart and Ricky Kurtz, Squire Gwynn, Howell Bird, and others. And Nancy, by virtue of living here, got a lot of personal knowledge of the area. And so now we got a new school, and we got a country club, and Charlie Bird and his buddies are sitting back and said, well, maybe we need a town to go along with these two things. So in September of 1950, 147 people that lived up here got together and signed a petition to form the town of Vestavia Hills. 147 people signed the petition, and the election was held on October the 24th of 1950. And I don't know whether I can adequately describe the area or not, but the area to be incorporated included 15 streets and parts of 5 other streets. And it was a small area. The northerly part was Grandview Boulevard, which is now Vestavia Drive, a part of that street. It didn't go further east than Beaumont. It didn't go further south than Southwood. It went across the highway a little bit, and it was a small area. But they had the election in October of 1950. 96 people voted. Imagine that, 96 people. The votes were 88 for and 8 against. And now we've got the town of Vestavia Hills, Alabama, and the population was 607 people. And one of the most important things that happened to us to change things was the federal government on December the 11th, 1950, started the construction of Highway 31 South. And things began to start to cook with the highway being started, and lo and behold, by 1954, Highway 31 was complete, and by 1957, we had 2,995 people living in the town of Vestavia Hills. And Alabama law says that when a town reaches a population of 2,000 people, then the name is automatically changed to a city, a municipality. So by the process of Alabama law, we changed our name. There's no paper that says this. We went from a town to a city. Meanwhile, things were growing and developing, and we had lots of children up here, and they were all attending the Vestavia Hills Elementary School, and every time we needed something, we would have to furnish the money to do it. We paid for water fountains, janitors, half of an addition to the building, and everything. And this is real important. A lawyer hates to sound like a lawyer at all times, but the legislature in August of 1959 enacted a law. And y'all are going to hear about this some more. And it was so positive for us. It's called the Independent School District Act. And what it says is that if there is a municipality, we had a municipality, November 8, 1950, and if we have schools in our district, then if we subsequently form a school board, then the new school board automatically takes title to whatever schools are located in the city with no payment. So the Independent School District Act was passed in 1959. Guess who formed the Board of Education? That was in. I know that the city of Mountain Brook had Crestline Heights and Mountain Brook Elementary School, so Mountain Brook had a city. Mountain Brook, incidentally, was incorporated in 1942. They had a city, and they had Crestline Heights, and they had Mountain Brook schools, and under the Independent School District Act, they were eligible to claim title to both of those schools without any payment. The 1950s era was a fun era. I was a teenager. It was the golden age of Hollywood. Chevrolet introduced the V8 motor. The rock and roll music was wide open. Every home had a television set. The hamburger joints that you see on Grease and Happy Days and all of these TV things, it was just like that. And here's the thing about Shades Valley High School. This high school was huge, and it needed to be huge because it was a county school. You didn't have any Hoover, Homewood, Vestavia, and Mountain Brook school systems back when it opened. The elementary schools of Hall Kent, Edgewood, Shades Cahaba, Crestline, Mountain Brook, Irondale, Cahaba Heights, Bluff Park, Vestavia, they all fed students to Shades Valley High School. When I walked in Shades Valley High School, I was scared slapped to death as a 13-year-old. I walked in the student lounge and they had a rock and roll music box in there. And anyway, it was the good thing about that was that Paul Boone and I, and Terry, who went to Crestline, I think, we got to go to school with all the children, not from just our area, but 11 areas as I count them. And everybody knew everybody else. Homewood Park had an outdoor movie on every Tuesday night. There were 6 theaters downtown. There was Hollywood Country Club. And one of the things that brought us all together was back then, there were 5 high school sororities and 5 high school fraternities. And in the summertime, everybody was invited. There was no charge to go to it. Most of these dances were held at the Highland Park Club, and everybody was welcome and everybody went. As a result of that, I grew up knowing people from John Carroll High School and Ramsey High School, as well as the people that I went to school with. Well, Pat, why are you telling us all about the 1950s? I'm telling you that because some of the characters that appear in our story in later years come from this little teenage group that was hanging out at Pig Trail Inn and Dale's Hideaway. And by 1960, we had a population of 4,028 people, and the city we had little money, but we reached down in 1960 and we bought 32 acres of land for $96,000, which is now Wall Park. In the meantime, the elementary school alone, in 62, 63, and 1966, we added over 12,000 square feet. We were growing so fast. One family sticks out in my mind, and Richard Pazitz doesn't like to see me coming because every time I see Richard Pazitz, I thank him personally one more time for all what his family did for our city with donations of land and so forth. The Pazitz family donated 22.5 acres of land to us, the city, in 1964. Now the fun starts. In 1965, the private plaintiffs in the United States Justice Department filed a desegregation case against the Jefferson County Board of Education, alleging that Jefferson County was running a racially dual school system that was segregated, and several other systems were involved in that. And this case was called Linda Stout versus Jefferson County, and it was a very active case, and you'll hear more about Stout as we proceed. As a matter of fact, you're going to hear a lot about Stout from me because in my later years I got involved in it. In 1967, the we were growing so fast, we needed a middle school. We donated the 22.5 acres to the Jefferson County Board of Education with the understanding that they would build a junior high school, middle school, which they did do. We asked that they name it the Pizitz Middle School. They wouldn't do it. They named it Vestavia Hills Junior High School. But anyway, we now had a middle school and a grammar school in our city. And in 1967, our city council jumped out there and borrowed $600,000, and we built the community center, which was the original library in the community center at Wall Park. Meanwhile, City of Hoover incorporated on April the 28th, 1967, and if you think we had a small initial area, the initial area that was incorporated as the City of Hoover was a rectangular piece of property that was 4 blocks long by 1 block wide. Look at them now. By 1969, we had a overpopulated school system with the county. We had 777 students at the elementary school, almost 1,600 at the middle school, 2,200 at Berry High School, and we were growing so fast that Jefferson County Board of Education added 54,000 square feet to the school that we had donated the land to that was just a few years old. So our forefathers had studied the proposition of whether or not we could afford to organize our own school system. And they decided early on in about 1960 that it wasn't financially feasible. But by 1970, it appeared we didn't have any choice but to do it. And we came up with the plan of a quality education system with a low pupil-teacher ratio. Homewood's thinking the same thing. Homewood organized their board in December of 1969. We followed suit a few months later. So by 1970, we had a population of 8,300 people, and our city council said we're going to have a vote of the citizens to see if they're willing to put an additional tax on all of us to support a school system. And so on April the 28th of 1970, we had a referendum vote. And I know that Nancy and I had been here for about 2 years, and we worked hard for that. And lo and behold, it passed, but barely. 219 votes passed it. This was an additional $7.5 million tax to be earmarked solely for the school system. And folks, you're going to be so proud and happy and pleased to hear how our city council held hands with our Board of Education when this started. We're in it with you. We're going to help you. And throughout this talk, you're going to hear what our city did for our board and working together. So when the tax passed, 2 days later, April 30, 1970, we formed our own school system. And I am so happy. I was here. I was just a young whippersnapper then, but I recognize that our city council established the most impressive initial Board of Education that you could sit down with a pencil and piece of paper and invent. 5 outstanding citizens. First, Guy Caffey, the chairman of the board of Birmingham Trust National Bank, that knows all about financing and borrowing money. Secondly, Doug Coretti. Doug Coretti is one of my mentors, and I'm going to talk about Doug some more. Doug was the president of the Alabama Bar Association the year before I was admitted. He is and was the foremost expert, in my judgment, in land and real estate in the state of Alabama. Law and real estate, building schools. The third member was Bill Harbert. Bill Harbert International. If there was a man that knew about construction, it was Bill Harbert. Fourth was Bill Hill, who was the chairman of the Merchants Association. He was our then Karen Odell, who was our longtime person at the Chamber of Commerce. And last, they appointed the smartest, the cutest, the most talented, active, and by far the most popular young lady on this mountain. And I'm pointing my finger at Sarah Wuska. Our city attorney and our board attorney at that time was Robert S. Vance, Jr., Bob Vance. I've been lawing. I'm in my 57th year, and I've dealt with some lawyers now. Bob Vance, at that time, and looking back, was the smartest lawyer that I've ever heard about, much less dealt with. Bob Vance was brilliant, and he is probably the only lawyer that I can imagine that could have navigated us through the desegregation case that I'm going to just talk to you about. But Bob Vance was he was very, very special. And when we organized our school system, Bob Vance impressed upon us over and over again. He said, look, the legislature in 1959 enacted the Independent School District Act, which means, folks, the title to the elementary school and the title to the middle school are in the Vestavia Hills Board of Education. No payment due, period. And we never paid for it. We acquired title to both of those properties by operation of law, but the county was wanting us to pay, and our bond counsel and Bob Vance said, the people pay taxes for a long time, don't pay them. You're entitled to own the schools by operation of law. We had about 2,500 school children when we organized our school system, and all we had now was the East and Pizitz, and that wasn't enough to take care of what we needed for schoolhouses, so we used the facilities at the Vestavia Hills United Methodist Church and also at the Civic Center that we had built in 1967 for $600,000. Here's where the fun starts. We haven't even opened our doors to school when we were brought into the desegregation Linda Stout case. And the theory of that case is that we're not going to allow school systems to operate with the purpose of having a dual, racially segregated school system. So Vestavia Hills was joined in as a defendant in that case, and we hadn't even opened the doors. And at any rate, here we go. Thank goodness we had Bob Vance, because Bob Vance was very experienced in things of that nature. And we had the case started off. Judge Sebring Lynn, who was a senior federal district court judge, and Judge Lynn was at Auburn with my father, and they were classmates at Auburn years and years ago, and he was a senior judge. Clarence Allgood was the other senior judge. And we got a brand new federal district judge, Sam Pointer Jr. Well, at any rate, this case lasted from, we were brought in the case in July of 1970, and they got a court order September 8 of 1971, and it's one of those big, thick orders. And basically it said, Vestavia Board of Education, you will not operate a racially dual school system that's segregated. You will have a desegregated school system. And we'd never had any intention of doing that in the first place. And secondly is you will accept transfers on a space available basis. Listen to me carefully. If a child is attending a school outside of Vestavia Hills that had a 75% student population of his or her race, and that child wanted to transfer to a different school system, Vestavia Hills, that had a 25% or less student population of that race, they could do so on a space available basis. And it said, Vestavia Hills, you will accept black children under that provision until you have a 25% student population of black children, and you will have a 25% faculty of black employees. And Sam Pointer, and before that I want to say this, that in the summer of 1970, we had no idea what we were doing about running a school. We'd never done that before. And Sarah, this is the hardest job. I salute you, and I can't brag on you enough. Y'all did the lifting, you and your other 4 members. Our male employees went down into the Winona-Oxmoor area. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Judge Pointer happened to be Bob Vance's best friend. Outside the courtroom, these people were inseparable. They were great friends, both really good guys. And there was a meeting down there in Birmingham, and everybody was present. And Judge Pointer looked at Bob Vance and said, Mr. Vance, here's what we're going to do. There's an area called Winona in the Oxmoor area, consisting of about 8 subdivisions: the Webbtown Bottom Nicholson subdivision, the Fairmont, the Nixon area, the Nicholson subdivision. When these children, these black children that live in this area, reach the 7th grade, Vestavia School System's going to buy a fleet of buses, and you're going to bus them to and from school, and you will charge them no tuition. You will educate them starting in the 7th grade. Mr. Vance looked at His Honor and said, Your Honor, we have no intention of doing that. Sam Pointer quipped back at him and said, Mr. Vance, you obviously didn't hear what I said. And Bob said back to him, he said, I heard exactly what you said. And Sam looked at Bob and said, Mr. Vance, you're about that far from going to jail. You better explain yourself. And Bob Vance said, don't give them to us in the 7th grade. Give them to us in the 1st grade. We'll teach them. That's powerful to me, folks. That showed right away that we had no racial motive in forming our school system. We wanted a quality education system with low pupil-teacher ratio. That's what we wanted. So, at any rate, that's what was written into the order, and our male employees went down in that Winona Valley, and some of these houses didn't have running water. Our male employees went down into this area, and their approach was, we have no idea what we're doing other than we're going to open a school come fall of 1970, and you're in it, and we want to help you do it. We're here to help you register. And as it turned out, as you'll see later in our story, those people loved Vestavia Hills school system. So the court let us form our school system, but it put an injunction against us and said, you will not operate a racially dual segregated school system, and you will operate under the supervision and control of the United States Justice Department and the Federal District Court. And every October and every February of every year, you're going to give us a stack of information. I took those things for 34 years to the Federal District Court, all of the statistical information that the Justice Department wanted. For 34 years, I did that. Meanwhile, it's 1972, we need a high school. So we go out in the bond market, we borrow $3.5 million, and we build Vestavia Hills High School, which opened in 1972. Money was so scarce and so tight that even with the allocation from the state, there was not enough money to pay the bills. Our city council stepped up and told our board, said, look, we're hurting financially also, but for a period of 3 years, just to keep us going, the city will pay 2/3 of the debt service on the high school loan, and the board can pay 1/3 of it. And that's what happened for a period of 3 years. Meanwhile, in 1972, I go up to a city council meeting. I come home that night, and I look at Nancy, and I said, sweetheart, you better buy you a new dress. What? Buy me a new dress? What are you talking about? I said, honey, I'm going to run for city council. She said, come on over here, boy, and sit down. Let me take your temperature. Something must be wrong with you. And she said, why would you want to do a fool thing like that? And I said, well, our children are 4 years old and 2 years old, and we're going to make our permanent home here, and we're going to be here forever. I want to be involved. And on August 8, 1972, I was elected to the Vestavia Hills City Council. In 1973, interest rates were really, really high. Finances were poor for both our city and our board. My kids were little, and I wanted to find a place where they could go swing or go down a sliding board. Well, guess what? There wasn't one. There was one swing set at the elementary school, and the ground that it sat in had eroded so bad that the concrete was exposed about this much, and it was nothing but hard pan mud. And in order to for our 4-year-old and 2-year-old to play, Nancy and I'd have to take them down to Homewood Park to the Bo Lewis Kiddie Park, and they had a fabulous toddler park. And the city had no money to improve the park. We had this fabulous 32 acres at Wall Park, no money. My beautiful wife, Nancy, stepped up and said, "I'll handle this." She got together with 40 other beautiful young ladies about our ages, and they formed the Mountaintop Upstart Garden Club. They went out knocking on doors, raised the money, never got turned down, had plenty of money, bought the equipment, and the husband of those 40 beautiful young ladies installed the playground at Wall Park, and we had a nice place for toddlers to play. And that spring, the city had a ribbon cutting thing for this new kiddie park. Patrick was 3 years old at the time, and they had this piece of granite with a bronze plaque on it. Thanks to the Mountaintop Upstart Garden Club for making this thing. And Patrick was sitting over there looking at that thing, and he looked back at his mama. He said, "Mama, is this where you gonna be buried?" And anyway, so now, in 1975, we got a population of almost 15,000 people. We had 3,181 students in the school system. We had a real need for a new elementary school. And again, we faced the problem of no money and no land. And the city at that time was in the garbage collection business. That was an absolute nightmare. The equipment would break down, people wouldn't pay their bills, and so the city wanted to get out of the garbage collection business, and they wanted to put an additional $7.5 million tax on all of us to fund the garbage collection service, and the Board of Education wanted an additional $2.25 million to build a new elementary school. And the sense among our board and our city was that the garbage tax would pass because people wanted that, but the vote had been so close on the original millage for the school system, they felt like that the tax on for the school would fail. Bob Vance stepped in and said, "Folks, let's add them together. Let's make it 9.75 mills, and we'll have an agreement between our board and our city that the city gets its part for the garbage and the school gets its part for the school." And that's what we did. Bob Vance wrote a letter to every resident in this city and said, "If you vote for the garbage ad valorem millage, it will be tax deductible on your federal and state income tax return." And lo and behold, we had a referendum vote, and the tax 9.75 passed with flying colors by 400 votes. And so now we had the money to build a new elementary school, but we had no land. John Foster, who I always admired, had been the Wall sisters' attorney forever, and they loved John Foster, and they always followed his advice. John Foster did his dead level best to talk the Wall sisters, Mildred and Edna, into releasing covenants on a portion of Wall Park. Remember, we bought Wall Park in 1960, and when we did, these sisters said, okay, Vestavia, we're going to sell it to you for $96,000, but here's what you can do with it. We're going to covenant it. You can use it for park and recreation, you can use it for a library, and you can use it for a community center. Forget anything else. No jail, no school. It specifically mentioned that. And so now we had the money to build a school, but we had no land, and everybody was down in the mouth. And city council, I'm 30 ladies. So anyway, I got an appointment to see Mildred and Edna Wall, and they accepted seeing me. They didn't ask me why I wanted to come. Probably wouldn't have let me come if they'd have known. But anyway, one Sunday afternoon, I went to their lovely home in Forest Park. And it was one of these old homes, and it was beautiful. And these were two little old ladies, and they had the sugar cookies on the Coca-Cola tray and they called me Mr. Boone. Imagine that. Mr. Boone, how can we help you? And I said, well, I'll just get right to it. I said, I would like to request that you release the covenant on a portion of Wall Park so we can build a new school. And they said, well, we've been over and over and over in this, and the answer is no. We've told Mr. Foster, we told Mr. Vance, the answer is no, but we're so curious, we want to ask you, why should we do it for you? And I said, well, here's why. I said, when my children didn't have a place to even have a decent swing or a slide, my beautiful wife and 40 others went out and knocked on doors, and they raised the funds to buy this beautiful equipment, and we installed it all. The daddies installed it, and guess where we put it? We put it in Wall Park that our city named after your father. And Mildred and Edna, here's how simple it is. When they didn't have a place to play, my wife stepped up and did it. And now, unless you step up and do it, they're not going to have a place to go to school. Well, nobody's ever put it to us that way before. Well, of course we'll release the covenant. So on April the 13th, 1976, they released the covenant. Our city council stepped up to the plate once again and donated 3.71 acres of the park to the school board. We had borrowed $1,200,000, and we built West School on the campus of Wall Park. Meanwhile, I was reelected to the city council in August of 1976, and Jimmy Carter was elected as president. When we put out bids for the construction of Wall Park, the low bidder was Myrie Construction Company, and I was raised at the same time as Dick Myrie, who went to Mountain Brook, and his younger brother Ben, and Ben owned Myrie Construction Company. Paul Bowen remembers well when we'd play those games in 1955 against Mountain Brook, and Dick Myrie was playing, and I mean these people younger than me. And Myrie Construction Company got the bid, and West Elementary was opened by 1977. Meanwhile, for years and years and years, the Birmingham Bar Association had tried to get Bob Vance to run for circuit court judge, and Bob Vance would have been bored to death doing circuit court judgeship. And he always said no. But guess what happened when Jimmy Carter got elected? Jimmy Carter recognized the talent of Bob Vance, and appointed him to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is one step below the United States Supreme Court. And later became the 11th Circuit. Now that was right down Bob Vance's alley. He accepted the appointment, and now the position of city attorney and board attorney are both vacant. The then superintendent, William T. Clark, and the then mayor, Jack Grace, came to see me, and I was 35 years old. I've been practicing law about 10 years. I had been exposed enough through being elected twice to know how difficult that Stout case was. I could see it. I was involved on the periphery, of course. But when they asked me to take Bob Vance's place, I started laughing. I said, good grief, I couldn't possibly take his place. And they said, well, think about it, and we really, really, really want you to take it. At that time, both of my parents were deceased. I didn't have anybody to talk to except Nancy's wonderful father and mother, Howard and Dorothy Purdue, and they encouraged me to do it. But I wanted to talk to somebody that would tell me something that would be honest with me and not brag on me when I didn't deserve it. So I went to see Judge William C. Barber, and Nancy and I went to high school with his daughter at Shades Valley. And he was an elected official like me, and he lived up here like me. And I went to see Judge, and I said, Judge, I'm in a dilemma. I feel inadequate to replace Bob Vance, frankly. That's my problem. He said, son, don't you feel one bit different than that? Every lawyer at the bar would be inadequate compared to Robert S. Vance, Jr. And I said, well, what should I do, Judge? And he said, well, Pat, we're a small, we don't have many lawyers. You have tried 20 to 25 cases before me. I can assure you that you're competent. And he said, don't forget what Benjamin Franklin said. I said, well, what did Benjamin Franklin say? He said, well, Benjamin Franklin said, tell me something and I'll forget it. Teach me something and I'll remember it. Involve me and I'll learn. Click. That's what I told Nancy several years before. When he said that word, get involved and you'll learn, I said, okay, I'm gonna accept it. And so I was appointed as the board attorney and the city attorney beginning January 1, 1978. And the good Lord has a way of telling us, whether we're doing something right or something wrong. I was still worried about it, but our president of our Birmingham Bar Association in 1979 was Clarence Small, and I knew Clarence real well. And back in 1979, I'm sitting behind my desk at 7 o'clock in the morning ready to work. And the phone rings, and it's Clarence Small, and he's 3 blocks uptown. And he said, Pat, I need to see you on a matter of urgency right now. Wow. Right now means I'm either getting facing the firing squad, I'm going to be disbarred. I went back and told Howard Purdy, I said, I don't have any idea what's going on, but Clarence Small will be here in about 10 minutes. And Clarence sat down and he closed the door behind him, and he said, Pat, as you know, you've been a member of the bar long enough to know, we don't get involved in judicial races. We can't afford to get involved in judicial races. But the deadline for qualifying for an open judgeship is approaching real fast, and an undesirable is the only candidate that's applied. And our executive committee has decided you're the man. He said, you're the perfect age, you've got the experience, you've represented plaintiffs, you've represented defendants, you don't have an axe to grind, you're not a crybaby or a whiner. We want you to offer for this judgeship, and we'll pay the money to finance your campaign. And I said, Clarence, I am flattered. I'm actually relieved that it was this, but I'm involved with our city, and I'm involved with our board, and I am flattered, but I respectfully decline. But for me personally, that reinforced my decision to accept the position, and it helped me personally. And in the meantime, they selected Stuart Leach, who was the presiding judge for more than 15 years, and he did a splendid job. Meanwhile, in 1979, our board that acquired title to Pizett's Middle School had done a land swap with a developer where the board took part of its property on the far side of Pizett's campus and swapped it to the developer for a piece of property on the other side. An even swap, no money passed hands, and everybody was living happily ever after. Well, when the property that got swapped we did a title search, the title company said, well, the title of this property is bad because it's in the name of Jefferson County Board of Education. And so we had to try that case, and lo and behold, one of these characters from the 1950s, Donald Sweeney, who turned out to be, Donald Sweeney, incidentally, in high school, was a gentleman and a scholar, and he was the president of our student body. He turned out to be the county lawyer. But Sweeney and I squared off in court over the title to the property, and the judge said, well, Sweeney, haven't you ever heard of the Independent School District Act that was passed in 1959, and the Vestavia Board owns that property? We still don't have a deed to Pizett's or the East School, and we never will have one. We don't need it. We got the law, and we've got the court order. And also in 1979, Jack Grace was the mayor. It was time to spruce up Wall Park and really, really do some improvements. And we applied for a federal grant with the Heritage Conservative, or whatever it was, anyway, the federal government, a matching grant for $606,500. That was a lot of money in 1979. We took the federal money and matched it with city money, and we had $1.2 million, and boy, did we do some real good work at Wall Park. As we entered 1980, the population in Vestavia Hills was 15,772 people, and we continued to add on to East Pizett's, and in the meantime we did add it on to Central later on. But we had completed our improvement of Wall Park by 1982. And in 1982, I'm sitting at my office one day, and the phone rings. Hello? Mr. Boone, this is Edna Wald. Do you remember me? And I said, Edna Wald, I could never, ever, ever forget somebody that did something as nice for me as you did. I'm going to ask you the same question you asked me. How can I help you? He said, Mr. Boone, we know y'all have done all this work on the park, but we need a sewer easement to put a sewer pipe across a soccer field. Arthur Young accounting firm had just paid us $10,000, and we had total sod over the soccer field. And I said, Miss Wall, you can count on me doing everything that I can do to get the sewer easement. And I took it to the city council, and the city council said, they did what we asked them, we're going to do what they asked. We dropped the sewer line, they dropped the sewer line in there, and we covered it up and restored it. It was good as new, and everybody lived happily thereafter. We're now in 1984, and in 1984 is when the Liberty Park community began with 300 acres. Imagine that, 300 acres. In 1987, we needed another school, and we didn't want to buy Central Elementary School because the property was bad, the building was bad, but we were desperate for space, and we bought the central property, which had belonged to a church, and it consisted of 17.4 acres, and we bought it knowing that it wasn't good property, but we had to have it, so we bought it. In the meantime, both the Wald sisters that died, and their estate had some lots at what I would describe as the northwest part of Wald Park, and our city council bought those 25 lots for $170,000. Meanwhile, the Winona-Oxmoor area, once the people found out that the Vestavia Hills school system was available to people that lived in those subdivisions, it looked like Countrywood Highlands. Fantastic. Richard Arrington was the mayor of Birmingham, and Richard Arrington said, this is a nice area, so the city of Birmingham arranged for an annexation election, and the old timers that we went down there to help on Saturday morning, buddy, they dug in at the 40. They didn't want to be annexed to Birmingham. Vestavia has been wonderful to us. We don't want any part. We don't want any part of Birmingham. Lo and behold, the election was in favor of annexing to Birmingham, and so in 1988, March 26, it was annexed to the city of Birmingham. Now we got people living in Birmingham that are eligible to attend our school. And we had a Board of Education meeting one night, and right after the election, and Carlton Smith was the superintendent, and he said, Pat, I need you to hang around if you can. I need to talk to you about something real important. So just the two of us, and he said, now that Oxmoor is annexed to Birmingham, doesn't that give us an entree to be released from this injunction and this court order? And I said, it does. I said, but Carlton, I said, how are we fixed for money? He said, Pat, we are in great shape money-wise. I said, are we crowded? He said, nope. We have a 17-to-1 pupil-teacher ratio. And I said, well, Carlton, do you see any need to change things from what we're doing now? He said, absolutely not. Let's keep going and see how it goes, because it's not hurting us. We're not crowded, and we're not hurting for money. The only dark point of this sunshine story happened on December 16, 1989, when Bob Vance was sitting in his kitchen with his wife on Saturday about 2 o'clock in the city of Mountain Brook and opened his mail that turned out to be a pipe bomb. And he was brutally murdered by that pipe bomb exploding. And it was done by a guy named Walter Leroy Moody, and our wonderful mayor, Ashley Curry, was a young FBI agent, and Ashley Curry actually worked on that murder case, and as a result of that good work, Walter Leroy Moody was tried in the federal court and given 7 life terms. He was tried in the state court and found guilty, and he was given the death sentence, and he was put to death on February the 13th of 1997 by lethal injection. We're now into 1990, and Vestavia Hills has a population of just a fraction under 20,000 people. And we needed some additional revenue, so the worker bees, Sarah Wuskell was one of them, and I was one of them, and we got out and we promoted a increase in ad valorem taxes, and we had the vote on May 8, 1990. It passed by 32 votes, and so we had some additional millage. In 1992, Red Book magazine named Vestavia Hills High School as the best high school in the state of Alabama. And by 1992, the Liberty Park community had grown from 300 acres to 2,500 acres. And Liberty Park joint venture, which consisted of the Drummond Coal Company and the Torchmark Development Company, made a request to the City of Vestavia Hills that the Liberty Park 2,500 acres be annexed to the city. At this point, the board, our board and our city came together, and we had a 13-member team. It was 5 counselors, 5 board members, Carlton Smith, Pat Reynolds, and yours truly, and we negotiated with the Liberty Park joint venture. They had 2 real nice, experienced representatives. Ronald O'Neill Durham represented Drummond, and Mark Elgin represented Torchmark. And Liberty Park was not contiguous. Contiguous means together. It was, the way the crow flies, is about 6 miles. And it would take a legislative act to annex Liberty Park to Vestavia Hills. And we hammered out an agreement, an annexation agreement, and we purposely did not include our board for 2 reasons. One, the board has no legal authority to do any annexing, and we didn't want to expose the board to any liability to have to do anything financially. So the city and the joint venture entered into an agreement, and the agreement highlighted this. The agreement said that the joint venture would contribute $15 million for schools, and we allocated, the breakdown was $3 million to improve Vestavia Hills High School. We would spend $4 million on an elementary school, and the other $8 million on a middle school. $15 million. And so the legislature approved the bill, and the property was annexed, and I can assure you that that property would never have been annexed unless our board and our city were 100% together on it, and they were. They were together on it. And the joint venture was to donate some acreage for a fire station, which they did do, and they would have donated $1 million to furnish that also. And so the property at Liberty Park was annexed in October of 1992 by legislative act. At the beginning of 1993, Red Book magazine said, we want to salute our city of Vestavia Hills as one of the most 50 fabulous places to live in the United States of America, and here's why. 1, schools, accessibility, home prices, safety, low crime rate, overall quality of life. Well, the City of Birmingham didn't like Vestavia annexing Liberty Park, and so they filed a lawsuit saying that the legislature did not have the legal authority to annex 2 non-contiguous parcels. And that lawsuit was filed in May 19, 1994. Justice Cook, you're not going to believe when that case was set for hearing. June 24, 1994, let's see, 35 days later, and the trial judge was Art Haynes Jr., who is my age, my buddy. He'd practiced law, and I knew Artie real well. Artie played football at Woodlawn, wound up marrying one of Paul Bowen's, my classmates, and Artie was a good lawyer and a good judge. He tried the case, and after the evidence was in, I said, Your Honor, may I ask you one question? He said, ask me anything you want to, Pat. I said, would you like post-trial briefs? He said, I've read all the briefs that y'all gave me before. The annexation is legal, final order. Annexation good, right there from the bench. Well, the City of Birmingham took an appeal to the Supreme Court of Alabama, and it just so happened that Janie Shores, who was my law professor at Cumberland, was the justice that wrote the opinion that said that the annexation was good. And one of the precedents that she cited in the case was the City of Birmingham in 1907 had annexed the city of Pratt City. And so, you know, non-contiguous. But anyway, so in 1995, the joint venture lived up to its word. It came forward with the acreage for the school and donated it turned out to be 28 acres. And again, in 1995, the Red Book magazine recognized the City of Vestavia Hills as one of the top most fabulous places to live in the United States. Now we've got Liberty Park properties annexed. We've got an agreement, but we don't have a schoolhouse. And so now it was time for the money to take place, and Carlton Smith and I had worked out an arrangement where we managed to get $3 million of the 15 early on, and our board added a wing to the high school to accommodate the additional high school students from Liberty Park. We took another $1.5 million to prepare the land where the elementary school and the middle school would sit. So Liberty Park joint venture owed us $10,791,000, and it was time to build the elementary school. Well, it was obvious that the $15 million commitment was not going to cover everything, because we needed the $10 million to build the elementary school, the board joined in as a party to the agreement, and the board said, give us the $10,791,000, we'll build the grammar school, and we'll take care of the middle school somehow in the future. Y'all are going to love the story about that. One of the better ones, really. So anyway, it came time to borrow the money. Here comes our city council again to help our board and the joint venture. Cities are tax-exempt organizations. Private entities like the joint venture is not. So the basic principle is cities can borrow money at a lower interest rate than a private developer because the interest is non-taxable. And so the joint venture said, well, we sure would like for the board to borrow the money, and we'll guarantee it. And our bond counsel got a little skittish about that. I didn't. I said, if a city lending money or giving money to a school board to build a school isn't a public purpose, then I don't need to be practicing law. And so the city council stepped up to the plate. They borrowed $10,791,000 from United Life Insurance Company in Dallas, Texas, payable over a 10-year period with the understanding that Drummond and Torchmark would guarantee the payment of it. I signed off on it. Our bond counsel wouldn't touch it, so we got Hobby Presley with the Maynard Cooper firm. He was all over it. He wrote it. The money was borrowed. The city took the $10 million, gave it to our board. Our board built the school, and lo and behold, the joint venture, like a Swiss watch, paid that loan like Roscoe, on time, full amount, and every payment was current. The problem is that what do we do about the middle school? The 1998 agreement, where the board was added as a party, had a provision in it that said that at such time as there are 300 students in the 3rd grade at the elementary school. By the way, the Myrie Construction Company got the bid on the Liberty Park deal, and it's a masterpiece. At such time as there are 300 3rd graders in the elementary school, the board will be obligated to open a middle school by the time those 3rd graders reach the 7th grade, 4 years. Now things start cooking. We reached year 2000 and some biggies happen. By year 2000, there were 24,476 people living in Vestavia. And Scotty McCallum was our mayor, and he had a vision that we needed to connect the Liberty Park area, which had grown from 2,500 acres to about 3,300 acres, and Old Vestavia by annexing the Rocky Ridge, the Cahaba Heights Fire District. And so we got together and we had one team that studied the problem, 5 counselors, 5 board members, the superintendent, the mayor, and the lawyer. And everybody was on board that it was a good idea to annex the Cahaba Heights Fire District provided we have a referendum vote of the people that lived there to see if they wanted to join us. And so the legislature passed the bill that said the Cahaba Heights Fire District would be annexed to Vestavia, provided a majority of the voters in Cahaba Heights approved it. It was approved by 2-1, 1,627 to 866. Meanwhile, the city had agreed, said, now, this was our idea, and the board concurred. The city funded the purchase of Cahaba Heights Elementary School. The Independent Act didn't apply because we annexed an area and we had to pay for it. And so the city bought the school $5,450,000 and conveyed it to our board, and our board owned it. But this election was right on top of the beginning of school, and the agreement between the county board and our board was the county board would run the school for the following school year, and we would pay them the equivalent amount that they would have received had the property not been annexed. I became a very unpopular person at the Jefferson County Tax Collector's Office because Bergen Kent, who represented the Jefferson County Board, and I had the duty to figure out how much did Vestavia Board owe the county board for running that school system for the school year. And boy, we knocked it out. I mean, it was a knockdown, drag out, but we finally agreed on it. And I'm one of these particular people, you got to show it to me. Don't tell it to me, show it to me. And we paid the county $1,767,000 for running that school for a period of 1 year. And that's the amount of revenue that they would have received had the property not been annexed. And everybody was happy with the number. And now our board owned Cahaba Heights Elementary School. What did Cahaba Heights annexation, how did it affect our city? Well, first of all, it annexed 2,016 acres, the equivalent of 3.15 square miles, and added 5,203 citizens. The next story is going to blow you slap away. In 2004, the Summer Olympics were held in Greece, and the outdoor track and field had built a new 8-lane track that was manufactured by Mondo. It just so happened that our board needed a new track, and we saw this wonderful facility on TV, 8 lanes made by Mondo, and the only problem was we didn't have the pocketbook to pay for it. We had enough money to cover 6 lanes instead of 8. And it was publicized in the newspaper. Vestavia Board lacks money to have 8 lanes, can't get but 6. Jamie Blair was the superintendent, and he called me one day. Jamie would never got excited, but he called me Booner. He called me one day and he said, Booner, I got a hot potato on my hands. I don't know what to do. Get up on the hill right now. Come on, Booner. I got in the car, and there was this unassuming looking man sitting in his office. And Jamie said to me, he said, Pat, I want you to meet Steve Domedicus. I I didn't know Steve Dometicus. And he was real quiet, and we shook hands, and Jamie said, well, I'll get right to it, Pat. Here's the deal. Mr. Dometicus called me for an appointment, and when he got up here, he said, I want to give the Vestavia Hills Board of Education the sum of $400,000 in cash, provided it spend the money solely for the purpose of building 2 more lanes so you'll have 8. No strings attached. I said, wow, Elizabeth. And so I said, Mr. Dometicus, you're going to have to forgive me. I'm going to apologize to you before I even start asking you these questions, but I'm fixing to insult you good and proper. Here you are offering to do something this nice, and I got to ask you stupid questions like, do you have any interest in the contractor that's going to do the job, the manufacturer of the material, blah, 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 blah. He said, no, there are no strings attached. I said, well, Steve, you're going to have to tell me your story. Why in the world would you come up here out of the clear blue sky and want to pay us $4 large? He said, well, here's my story. Said, I'm a military brat. My father was in the Army, and we moved around from place to place. In my high school years, I attended high school in the state of Maryland, and I was a pretty good football player, but I was real good in track, and I really liked both. And I was fortunate enough to where Coach Paul Bear Bryant gave me a football scholarship to play football at Alabama. And I took the scholarship and I played for a couple of years, and I really didn't like football because my heart was in track. And I quit football and concentrated on track. And I love track, and I love for people to enjoy track. The good Lord has blessed me financially. I've had all this success. And I just want the people of Vestavia Hills to have 8 lanes instead of 6, no strings attached. And so we ended the conversation, and here's how it ended. He said, well, I'm going to be back here up in this office tomorrow, and I will have a cashier's check payable to the board for $400,000. And I would like your permission to allow me to bring my little 11-year-old daughter to a place like this because I was treated so nice by Dr. Blair and Mr. Boone and others. I want my little daughter to see this. So the next day we met, he delivered the check, we built the 8 rounds, and he laughed as he was walking out the door. He said, Mr. Boone, do you know where I live? I said, no. He said, I live in Mountain Brook, and my neighbors are going to kill me, but I'm going to tell them to go fly a kite because they've already got an 8-lane Mondo deal. You won't believe the story that I'm fixing to tell you now. 2004. Larry Langford was the president of the Jefferson County Commission. And Larry Langford recognized that there were 11 school systems in Jefferson County, and they were Birmingham, Bessemer, Fairfield, Homewood, Hoover, Jefferson County, Leeds, Midfield, Mountain Brook, Tarrant, and Vestavia Hills. 11 school systems. And he knew that those school systems needed some help financially. And Larry Langford came up with an idea. He said, I want Jefferson County to enact an ordinance that will levy an additional 1 penny sales tax that will be used for the benefit of the 11 school boards on a pro rata basis, and they can use it only for debt payment, technology, brick and mortar. No salaries, no bonuses, no trips, no anything. And he said, my plan is that we will borrow $1 billion. $1 billion. And the penny tax will be used to retire the debt over a period of years. Lo and behold, the Jefferson County Commission passed the tax. It was challenged in court at the circuit court level. Judge Carol Privet had it, and she ruled that the tax was valid. The case went to the Alabama Supreme Court. The Supreme Court affirmed the validity of it, and it just so happened that Sam Pointer had retired from the federal bench. And I knew Sam Pointer, but we were not people that spent time together. And after this happened, telephone rang one day. Sam had retired from the federal bench and was practicing law. He said, Pat Boone, this is Judge Sam Pointer. Well, my little heart started to race. I said, Lord, what's going to happen now? He said, I'm representing 4 plaintiffs that are challenging the Larry Langford tax, and I need you to do me a huge favor. I said, well, I'll do anything I can, Judge. He said, I want you to retrieve those old court papers where Vestavia was part of the desegregation case in 1970 and 71. I didn't ask him why he wanted them. I said, yes, sir, I'll get them. I got them to him pronto, sent them to him. And to this very day, I can't connect the dots to see why he wanted those papers. But he wanted them, and I gave them to him. And it just so happened that the Supreme Court affirmed the case, and Jefferson County borrowed $1 billion. The board share of the issue was 5.04908%. I see Courtney Brown here. Your eyeballs would have fallen out if you saw the check I saw. And anyway, our share of that issue was $51,500,000. It came up there to the Board of Education, and Connie Renfro was our controller, and I called her on the phone. I said, Connie, make me about 10 copies of that check, because it's hard for me to believe that we got a windfall of $51,500,000. And so I went up there to get it. I was so excited, I was trembling. And I said, I'm going down to see Doug Coretti. Over from day one until 2004, I bet you that I tried 25 cases to a conclusion with Doug Coretti. Doug Coretti made a doggone really good zoning lawyer out of Pat Boone. And the way he did it was, he took me to the courthouse on 25 cases, and he beat me like a barred mule for about 20 of them. And I'd have to say, looking back, that the judge reached the right conclusion on every one of them. I won about 5 and he won 20. I learned to love Doug Coretti. he taught me, just like Benjamin Franklin said he would. And Doug had gotten up in age, and I knew right where his office was, and I got that check. And I went down to his office, and I told his secretary, as soon as I walked in, I said, "Don't you dare tell Doug Coretti I'm here." I took my shoes off, and I quietly slipped into his office. Doug had his raincoat on, and he was writing like this. His face was right close to that paper. And I tiptoed up to that. And I slipped that check under his nose. He looked at that thing, and he raised his head. He said, "Pat, y'all are doing good." And I said, "I second the motion. We are doing good, but Sarah Wuska and you did great, and none of this would have ever happened without that first board and what y'all did." I mean it. I know. Anyway, so Doug had a nice feeling about that. And the next thing is, we now had sufficient funds to build a middle school. We had $51,500,000. I asked Jamie Blair one time, he said, "I'd made other arrangements, but this is nice." And so anyway, we undertook to build the 6th grade wing. Cost us about $8 million, and the next year we built the 7th and 8th grade wings, $19 million. The Liberty Park Middle School, with those two added together, $27 million. State of the art, uptown, big deal. Now the fun starts. I mean, the real fun starts. We had annexed Liberty Park, and we had annexed Cahaba Heights, and we didn't have that reserve flush money that we once had, and things were tightening up financially and student population. And Jamie Blair asked me, he said, "Pat, don't you think it's time that we ask the federal court to relieve us of this court order that we've been in since 1971. It was 2006. We had taken those voluminous reports up twice a year. Not one single time did the Justice Department, the plaintiffs, or the federal court ever challenge us on you're shy on doing this, or you're not doing this right, or blah, blah. So, anyway, we decided, the board decided, that we would ask for unitary status, which meant that we would be declared what we intended to start out to be anyway. A school system that served all students, regardless of what the color is. 2, get rid of this injunction stuff. And 3, dismiss this foolishness that we are involved in. So we filed our petition for unitary status in the federal district court here in Birmingham. And we had a meeting with the people in the Winona area after dark down in their neighborhood at a little church. And it was Jamie Blair, Claire Gwaltney, me, George Elliott, I forget the other two, but They selected. What we wanted to do was, Winona Oxmoor people, if you have students that are attending our school system now, they can finish, no matter if they're in the first grade, they can come all the way through the 12th grade. And if they've got a day-old sibling, that sibling is eligible, that'd be 18 years. That's what our plan was. And so I started talking. All 3 television networks were there. I hadn't talked 15 seconds, and this female got up, wiggling around, shaking her hand at me, screaming, "Mr. Boone, have you ever heard of Norman Chatkin?" Well, I'd read Norman Chatkin's name in law books. He was an expert in desegregation cases. He handled almost every one of them. He's gonna spit you up and chew you out and make you wish you had never started to become a lawyer. Now take that. I said, I followed General MacArthur's words, these proceedings are closed. It was an unproductive meeting, and so we proceeded with the case. I engaged one of your law partners, Norman Walker, out of the Montgomery office. Norman Chatkin was the chief trial counsel for the NAACP. They had 2 private attorneys here in Birmingham, and the Justice Department sent down 4. So here we go. I Googled Norman Chatkin, and here's what I found out about Norman Chatkin. White male, exactly my age. Lawyer, admitted August 1967. I'm admitted September 1967. It turned out that Norman Chatkin wasn't nearly as loud as I am. He was quiet, he was a gentleman and a scholar, and buddy, he knew what he was doing. His office was in New York. The case was assigned to District Court Judge Virginia Hopkins, and when we started, she said, folks, I'm going to give y'all 1 year to get acquainted. Here's what unitary status is. Here's what we sought. We wanted to be declared as a unitary school system that was desegregated, that accommodated all children regardless of color. And in order to do that, the federal standard is you've got to meet 3 things in the burden of proof. First, has the board complied with the court order for a reasonable period of time? We had done that for 36 years, not one single complaint. Has the board eliminated the vestiges of discrimination? We didn't have any discrimination in this school system. And last, have the people made a good faith effort to protect the constitutional rights that originated the order in the first place? And we met all 3 of those in my judgment. And over about 9 months, we sent Norman Chatkin 22,000 pages of documents. He wanted to know about student assignments, faculty and staff assignments, transportation, extracurricular activities. Do we send the black children to the crummy schools and the white children to the well-constructed schools? Are we providing a educational opportunity for all children. He read every one of those documents. And Norman would come down here about every 2 months. And Greg, we would meet up at Balch and Bingham because we needed a big place to meet with all these lawyers. Norman Chatkin could not have been nicer, more professional, easy to deal with. He was just, it was a good experience for me to deal with him. Norman called me on the phone one day and he said, "Pat, not only will I not try this case with you, I can't try it with you. Y'all have done it right. I don't have any complaint. We agree to your plan." Our plan was that the children in the Oxmoor area could finish their education, siblings could finish their education, and then our obligation was over, done. And the United States Justice Department, imagine this. I promised I wouldn't read anything to you. I'm going to read this to you. After reviewing the board's responses and other information, including census data, it is the opinion of the United States that the Vestavia Hills School District has complied with its desegregation obligations and federal law. Accordingly, the United States has no objection to the court granting the board's motion to be declared unitary, to dissolve the injunctions, and dismiss this case. United States of America. Thanks to you, Sarah. Okay, so when you have cases like that, you don't just do it, you do it in the courtroom. And so we went down there before Judge Hopkins, and it just happened to be on my birthday. And we're down there, and people that have never been to federal court is quiet as a tomb. You better be dressed properly. You better not have chewing gum, no newspapers, blah, blah. So anyway, Judge Hopkins said, "Mr. Chatkin, Norman Chatkin, I want to hear from you." He stood up out of his chair and he said, "Your Honor, we agree to what the board asked for, and all I can do is give them a standing ovation. I've made a career out of this, and I'm happy to announce that this is my final case. My wife and I are going to retire to the Adirondack Mountains, and they sent me 22,000 pages of documents. I can find no evidence of discrimination, and we agree to it. I'm leaving the practice of law on a good feeling." And the Vestavia school system has done far more for its students than the legal obligation is. And so Judge Hopkins entered the order that declared us to be unitary. It dissolved the injunctions and dismissed the case. We're out of it. About that same time, you've heard me talk about back in the 50s about characters showing up. Well, when Paul Boone and I were being raised, everybody knew everybody. The people that went to Shades Valley knew the people that went to John Carroll, and the John Carroll people knew the Ramsey people. And if you didn't know them personally, you knew about them. Well, there was a good Catholic family in Homewood right down the street from Our Lady of Sorrow Church called the Natter family. The Natters were 7 boys and 2 girls. Wonderful, wonderful people, fascinating family. 4 of those boys graduated from the Naval Academy. And I can remember when I was 13 years old, I'm the 3rd baseman for the Red Sox. Jack Natter was the center fielder for the Yankees, the top hitter in the league. Billy Natter was the catcher for the Giants, and Charlie Natter was the left fielder for the Cubs. Anyway, so everybody knew everybody. And about this time, when we got through with this case, Billy Natter, matter of fact, I just spent the last week with Billy and Bob Natter on a week golf trip that we've been doing. So anyway, we're close friends. And so anyway, at this time, Billy Natter was living in Annapolis, and his father was up in age, and every Christmas he would come home to visit his dad. And so when he came home, all of our group, we had about 20 couples, we'd get together, and we rented the banquet room over at Smith and McCormick's over there behind Brookwood Mall. And it's Christmas holidays, and we're having dinner and having some cocktails and having a big time. And we're about halfway through the evening, and Billy Natter decides he's going to fool with me. So he comes over there. He said, "Pat, I want you to meet my neighbor from Annapolis. Pat, meet Ted Garish." That name kind of sounded familiar, but I couldn't connect it. You know, I'd never seen this man before. Ted Garish. Billy Natter looked like the cat that swallowed the canary. He said, "Pat, Ted really doesn't want you to know what he does for a living." I said, "Well, I'll take the bait. What does he do?" He said, "Well, he's a lawyer." I said, "Well, nobody's perfect, so I'll excuse him for that." He said, he really doesn't want you to know who he worked for. I said, "Okay, Billy, you're getting to it. I'll take the bait. Who did he work for?" He said he worked for the United States Justice Department. United States Justice Department. Wow, I'm impressed. He really doesn't want me to tell you what case he worked on. And Ted Garish is over there about to split it, laughing at me because I'm all excited now. They've led me up to the water. They fix and take care of me. Ted Garish was the lead counsel for the United States government in Stout versus Vestavia Hills. And buddy, I sobered up real quick. I said, "Okay, Ted." I said, I've been the board attorney for many years. I said, "What is your take on that case back in 1971? And he said, "Well, Pat," said, "I was in fact the lead counsel." Said, "I took the deposition of Bob Galat, the mayor, and I took the deposition of Jack Grace, the education person, and they both testified that we formed the school system for quality education with low pupil-teacher ratio." He said, "I was a young lawyer then," and he said, "The first judge that I dealt with was Judge Sebring Lynn. Sebring Lynn was up in age. He was quiet. He was brilliant. Sebring Lynn had a knack of encouraging lawyers to settle cases. If Steve Odell and I had a case, Judge Lynn would get us in and said, "Steve, I appreciate your client's position, but he's asking for too much. And Pat, I appreciate your client's position, but you're being chinchy. You need to pay more. Y'all need to come together." Well, I said, "Ted, what is your take on the case?" He said, "Well, Judge Lynn got me in," and he said, "Mr. Garish," said, "I appreciate the way that you conduct yourself in my courtroom. You're always properly dressed. Your work is timely. You conduct yourself just like a good lawyer is supposed to. But you're not going to win this case. You ain't going to win. Let's analyze whether he won or lost. Looking back on it now, and I wasn't the lawyer because Bob Vance was, we win the case because we got to form our school system. As I see it now, Ted Garish won the case, at least part of it, because he got this injunction, he got this rule that says, all of these, you got to have quotas, you can't do this, you can't do that. We were under that strict court order for 36 years. And I asked Billy Natter just this past week when we were playing golf, I said, tell me about what Ted Garish is doing. And he said, well, he's working for the Secretary of Energy and just wide open. But anyway, I thought that was an unusual thing. And Nancy and I were down at the Golden Rule Barbecue having lunch on a Saturday about 6 years ago. And it's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We had a booth in the back. And all of a sudden, this African-American man in a postal uniform walked to my table, and I heard Nancy and him exchange. He said, hi, Ms. Boone. Hello, John. Turned out he was our postman. And he walked up to me and he said, are you Mr. Pat Boone? I said, I was when I left home. And I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, well, I want to thank you. I said, well, I appreciate the kind words, but what did I do for you to thank me? He said, well, my son, years ago, about this time, his wife walked up. She was also a postal person. She had paid the bill and walked back to the table. Both of them were standing there. And he said, back when our son was attending Woodlawn High School, and he applied for the majority to minority transfer rule, and you accepted him. And it's been a sunshine story ever since. He graduated from Yale, graduated from Harvard Law School, and he's practiced law in D.C., and it's all thanks to you. I said, well, I appreciate the kind words, but let me tell you where the thanks should go. The thanks should go first to your son that wanted to do this and had presence of mind to ask for that. And as for me, I was just one man on a team of many that I didn't do that by myself. And I don't remember his name, but yes, we approved it. But that was just a team effort of what we were supposed to do. Now, we got two guys in this room that I'm going to talk about now. In 2009, our city decided that we were getting big and we needed to hire a city manager. The law allows city councils, without anybody approving anything, to go out and hire a city manager. Well, our then city council in 2009 recognized that we could do better. And we wanted to hire a city manager, but we didn't want to do it without the people saying it was okay to do it. And so our city council got together. They excluded me. They didn't need me, but they drew what they wanted in a bill. They wanted to reduce the size of our government from 5 city councilors and 1 mayor to 1 mayor who would be one of 5 city councilors, and that the city manager would be the chief administrative officer for the city. And they sent those notes to the legislative department, and they wrote the bill. And it was, in 2010, we had a population of 34,000 people. We had big money budgets. And the difference between a mayor-council form of government and the council-manager form of government is, under our old system, the mayor's the chief administrative officer of the city, and that's a part-time position, and the city council can't enact a law that said it's a full-time position. So if a guy wanted to work 1 hour a week, he could do it. And we decided we need somebody right on top of this city running it. And so we had the election, and it passed. 1,780 people voted in favor, and 1,144 voted against it, and it passed. And folks, y'all all know Jeff Downs. He's sitting in the room with us. It's the best thing that's ever happened to this city, in my view. And he came on board May 13, 2013, May 31st, 2013. Jeff, you've done a fantastic job, and we are fortunate to have you. So, anyway, we now are moving past 2010, and our board is running out of space. And really. Anyway, so we needed more school space. We had tried twice to buy Berry High School, and we got right up to the lick log, and the Hoover City Council would convince the Hoover Board, don't sell, we might need that property. But lo and behold, when they built that new facility out there, they needed the money. And the bottom line is, our board bought the Berry High School campus, 40 acres. Imagine that. $11 million. Our city contributed $2 million of that. And Todd Freeman, y'all have done a fabulous job with that school, renovating it and adding on to it. It is fantastic. And I remember that someone asked the question when the city council voted to pay our board $1 million, has the property been appraised? Rick Lathan, the board architect, stood up and said, I just designed a facility, a school in North Alabama where the athletic facility like Berry has cost $7.5 million. And Berry's is better than the one we just built. So, and then 5 years later, the board became as fortunate as the city did when we lured Dr. Todd Freeman from Sylacauga. And we got Dr. Freeman on board on March 12, 2018, and you too have done an absolute fantastic job leading our board, and we are fortunate to have you. These two guys are sitting by each other. They meet every week and they work together. It's not us and them, it's us. We're one unit. To give you an example, I'm not saying that other cities don't do this. I'm not saying that at all. But I know that our city council has two adjectives that it describes when it wants to deal with our board. It is collaborate and invest. Our city council enacted an additional 1 penny sales tax in 2018 and earmarked funds for our board in that. I'm not saying that that doesn't happen other places. I just hadn't heard about it. I'm proud of y'all for doing that, by the way. They have entered into a memorandum of understanding about the use of facilities. We don't duplicate things. The board uses city facilities. The city uses board facilities. Each takes care of its own obligations. And in 2018, we needed more school space, and we were fortunate enough to be able to buy Gresham Elementary School, which is now Dolly Ridge, for $6,750,000. And things continued to grow, and we needed to add on to the West Elementary School. Understand, West Elementary School opened in 1977. So everybody's on board with this. The board wants to do it, and the city's willing to give a little bit of property at West Elementary. And lo and behold, when we signed that agreement in 1979 with the Heritage Group, the Department of Interior, we signed an unequivocal agreement that said Wall Park will be used for park and recreational purposes only and for no other purpose. Well, when we signed that, that's exactly what we wanted. That's exactly what the wall said. Everybody was in sync. And Jeff Downs stepped up and said, look, I know these people. I know how to solve this problem. He rolled his sleeves up. He knew the people at ADECA. He knew the people at the Department of Interior. Let me handle it. And I'm going to reach back to the 1950s. Number 81, Wally Nall, right in on our football team. Very successful businessman, and in his time, Wally and his business partner bought the property that the Altadena Golf Club was on, and it operated for many years, and when it closed, Wally Nall, who lives in Mountain Brook, came to see Jeff and said, I want to donate Altadena Golf Course to be used for Passive Park. He made the transaction, and so in dealing with the federal government, Jeff Downs said, well, I've got this other property. We will dedicate 77 acres of Altadena property. That's what we were going to use it for anyway. And you release this property at West Elementary. And they did it, and the addition was made, and once again, everybody lived happily ever after. And Jeff Downs knew how to do this conversion. He had spent 26 years with the city of Montgomery. In the last 13, he was the chief administrative officer, knows everybody, and did it. This was another example of how the city and board and work together. And the city has some construction projects, but the board has a construction project going on at all times, it seems. Isn't that right, Todd? And people don't realize that county and city school boards in Alabama are agencies of the state of Alabama. They're actually governed by the state rather than by the city. And in construction projects, the rules and regulations of the city don't apply to the school board. period, paragraph. The rules that apply are the rules in Montgomery by the Department of Construction Management, used to be the Alabama Building Commission. But here's what's happened during every time I've ever been up here. Our city offers the services of our building department to help with all of these construction projects. And our board says, thank you very much, city. And everybody's happy about that. It's the most protective way I know to build a school building. The only people that don't like it are the contractors that the board hires. But you know, the state can't regulate like the city can be out there in 5 minutes. So we roll forward to 2018. Well, we've covered the Gresham School. When our city council bought the Gold Gem property and built the new community center, guess what it did with the old community center property at Wall Park? It gifted that facility to our board back in 2022. And the board uses that for a multitude of office space, recreation. I'm closing in on my final comments. Where is our board today? Our board operates 9 schools, owns all of them, including Pizitz and East, by virtue of the Independent School District Act, 2 middle schools, the freshman campus, and the high school. We have 6,872 students. Courtney Brown's our controller, and Courtney tells me that our budget for this year, $124,500,000. We have a total of 923 employees, 530 certified teachers. 68% of our teachers have a master's degree. 7% of our teachers are educational specialists. 3% have doctorate degrees. 60 are nationally board certified teachers. And you know, we've said over and over and over that we want a quality education system with a low pupil-teacher ratio. These additional taxes that we put on ourselves over the last 55 years, we fund 115 locally funded teachers with that money. The average teacher's salary exceeds $75,000. Where's our city today? Our city has a population of 38,020 people. 14,115 households. Budget, $73,280,541. We have 302 classified employees, 103 unclassified. We have 109 firemen. We have 114 uniformed policemen. Well, 114, 111 are uniformed. I want to say, after standing here before you, Lord have mercy. Elizabeth, I'm coming to join you, honey. I've been talking for 2 hours and 22 minutes. I want to stand before you and tell you one of my opinions. Having lived here for 58 years, The City of Vestavia Hills is the best kept secret in the United States of America. And the school system is absolutely the crown jewel, period. I'm proud to live here. I'm proud to tell you our story. Sarah, I can't salute you and Doug and Guy and Bill enough. Without those 5, none of this would have ever happened.
You too, Pat.
Well, you know, the old saying is things get easier, but we all know that easy gets harder as you age. But anyway, that's another story. Thank you for saying that. I want to say this. I'm closing down. I want to say thank you to everybody that's had a hand in letting me be on this team for over 50 years. Thank you. That's it. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Thank you.
Glad you came. And the mayor's gonna.
You didn't tell them that you were unopposed. When you ran again.
I'm going to make this real brief, but wow. I mean, what else can you say? And thank goodness we've got all of this on video today. So. But Pat, I want you to know that you're part of this history, no question. And because of you and a lot of other folks, we can live happily ever after.